There's justifications for everything. So don't, and you'll very, very rarely hear me say this, don't overthink it. Because for everything you say, you can have a justification for why, well, no, that's not realistic or whatever it may be. So don't overthink it.
At the end of the day, we don't all value everything equally. We don't associate meaning to the same things. Some things mean the world to people, and I can't even imagine it. And vice versa.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode number 1429. We really wish we stopped spending time with these people sooner. We talked about arrogant and entitled people, and maybe we have been arrogant and entitled in certain seasons of our past. So again, no judgment on that, but we want what's best for you. And if you are somebody who is very heart-driven and maybe somebody who is more sensitive, being around those people probably isn't good for you. Today, for episode number 1430, 3 questions to ask yourself to get more clarity. I am very giggly because Alan and I have been behind the scenes for a couple hours, cracking jokes and just having a good time. Now we jump into super serious mode where we record episodes in front of thousands of people. And sometimes it's weird.
It doesn't have to be that serious.
You don't think so?
I think we need to be professional, but also have some fun.
I would concur with that. 3 questions to ask yourself to get more clarity.
Mm-hmm.
I am realizing between the events we've gone to, the coaching calls we've done, the students we spoke to recently, most of them were students, that having clarity is a superpower.
Definitely.
But also having clarity is challenging. It's challenging to know, how do you know how clear you are? Really? It's really hard to understand how clear you are until you get more clear and then you understand, oh, I wasn't really that clear at all. I would say you and I have had a very similar experience. I remember we went to a Brendan Burchard event years ago, and we filled out these worksheets about our level of clarity. And I remember thinking, I'm not that clear. I'm a podcaster, self-improvement, hyper-conscious. I'll probably do some coaching. And when we were in the group with these other people, I think my lowest score that I gave myself was maybe a 7. And I think the next highest score was a 4. And that was very illuminating for me because these were people that were in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, maybe even 60s. And that was the first time I ever really felt like I had a higher level of clarity. But a lot of that was from behind the scenes conversations with you and just podcasting every single day and having deep conversations and asking myself questions, some of these questions. So now we're going to give the questions.
Kev, this is good. This is good.
Alan.
Clarity is the first C of our 5 C's in the course we did.
It is.
And the reason why is because over the years, Kevin and I have become much wiser, and we've reflected back and realized that we have certain things that other people aren't as high in. And that's one thing that I want to share with everyone as well is you shouldn't be coming to Next Level University for everything. We are holistic, health, wealth, and love. Life, health, wealth, and love.
Life, love, health, and wealth, damn it.
I know, the syntax.
I say it every single episode.
I know. Life,
Listen.
love, health, and wealth.
Well done.
For me, Kev, health is the most important. So I tend to say health, wealth, and love.
That's fair.
But that's okay. That's neither here nor there. Kevin and I did a monthly meetup on how your mental health is hindering your growth. And I had a really powerful moment after that of, number 1, that was way outside my comfort zone. Number 2, Emilia and Bianca talk about mental health all the time. I know Jesse, who is the director of monthly meetups, also talks about mental health often. And I asked her after it, I said, how many speeches have you given on mental health? Podcasts, speeches, things like that. She said, hundreds. And I realized mental health is something Kevin and I do. And it's definitely something that we can talk high level about, but it's not necessarily our main thing. So the reason I'm bringing this up right now is that this episode's about clarity. You don't know how clear you are until you look back at how clear you weren't. You and I didn't even know we were that clear until we went into a room with hundreds of other people, and we realized that our score on clarity was very high. 6 years, you and I, 6 years ago, start a podcast each. Team up, awesome, hyperconscious becomes NLU. Reflecting on the last 6 years, Kev, it's very obvious that we had a ton of clarity right out of the gate.
Yeah.
In comparison to others. And that's what I would like our listeners to ask themselves. Do you feel, in comparison to others, like you have more clarity on who you are, who you aspire to be, what you want to do with your life, or less? Where do you think you're at, 0 to 10? That would be the first question.
It's a bonus question.
Bonus question. And that's what we're talking about today, because clarity creates certainty. Certainty creates action. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates results. And then results actually create more opportunities, which then you start to tend to lose focus and have to relearn who you are from that next level. So Kev, without further ado, what are the 3 questions?
The 3 questions. We'll do a little story before each one of them. I remember Alan and I were going to Colorado, and we were in the airport. It was probably, we usually take early flights just because it's easier. Go to the airport, get to wherever we're going. It's still pretty early. You can sleep on the plane, catch up on sleep. And we were at our gate getting ready to take this flight, and there was a family. There was what I assumed to be a mom and dad, and I think there was 3 little kids. And the father was hammered, and it was early. I don't remember how early, but I remember early enough where I remember thinking to myself, I didn't even think that restaurants were open and or serving alcohol at this time. It's too early for that. So Alan and I are sitting there. Alan's working. I'm preparing to get on the plane. And I remember you and I were visibly upset that the father at one point was dragging the child across the floor to go get another drink. And you and I were just pissed. We were so angry, so frustrated. This is a problem. What's going to happen with that kid? Like, you know, all that stuff for you and I. And I think we were both pretty close to crying at that point. And we were confiding in one another. That's one of the first questions. What bothers you? What really, really, really pisses you off? What wrecks your day? What upsets you to the point where you cannot move forward with your day until you talk about it, think about it, act about it, whatever it may be? What really, really bothers you? Alan and I both grew up without fathers. Mine was somebody who left. Alan's was one who was taken from him. And we didn't necessarily have positive male role models in our life. We believe at a deep level that if we did, our lives would have looked different. And they would have for sure. I don't know if I ever would have ended up podcasting. I don't know if you ever would have gone to WPI. A lot of things would have been different, right? But in my mind, I'm thinking, I feel really bad for those kids. What's going to happen to those kids? So we have a deep spot for children. We have a charity foundation for children of single parents. Even, excuse me, even when you hear me ask that question, we have a bunch of answers under why that made us upset, why that frustrated us, why that bothered us. That's a very impactful question for you to ask because yours is probably completely different. Or it could be the same. I don't know. Taryn cannot watch an animal get hurt. She can't do it. Not even in movies. She closes her eyes, covers her ears, and says, "Let me know when it's over." It's just, that's one of her things. But she cares so deeply for living creatures. All of them. She's very similar to you and Emilia. If we catch something, she'll bring it outside. It doesn't matter what it is, spider, whatever it is. But that's one of the things that upsets her, is when animals are mistreated, when people are mistreated. That's one of the reasons she does what she does. So that is the first question. What bothers you? And the framing for that is what pisses you off, what makes you angry, what wrecks your day, what fires you up, what creates an emotional reaction to you. And really, you could say that as question 1 is not just what bothers you, but what creates a really meaningful emotional shift in you. That's question number
1. The only thing that I would share about that is it was very clear that those parents, from our perspective, particularly the father, but both of them, those kids are going to be growing up in an environment that doesn't have a lot of guidance, doesn't have a lot of awareness, doesn't have a lot of hyper-consciousness, doesn't have a lot of health, wealth, and love. And that's actually why the Next Level University podcast exists. To try to help people become more aware, become more hyper-conscious, to learn, to grow, to study, to understand, to be more empowered. And when I looked at those little kids, Kev, I got sad for sure. I got pissed off as well. Yeah. But I ended up saying, Kev, I have to put my earplugs in. I can't listen to this. I cannot listen to the way this is going on. So witnessing this scenario with the father obviously not being kind, not being a good role model, not being empathetic, not being a good father, quite frankly. My blood was boiling. So was Kev's. I put my earplugs in. It's not our place, I suppose, to say anything. So it's just going to make it worse. So let's just move forward. But when we're on that plane, and I'll often do this with Kev, assuming I'm not sleeping. Normally I'm just sleeping. But I'll look out the window and see all of the city, whatever city we're flying out of or flying into. And I'll say every single person down there is a potential podcast listener. Mm-hmm. And I always think about that because this podcast, quite frankly, would have been exactly what I would have needed. If I was 12 years old or 17 years old or 22 years old and I found this podcast and I found you and I would have had way more clarity. I would have had way more guidance. I would have been so inspired. I would have learned so much more. I would have improved so much more. And so that's what it is ask yourself that question. What bothers you the most? I was talking about this in book club. It's not socially acceptable to be pissed off and to be angry. But I do believe you are pissed off and angry for a reason. And I believe if you dig into that and try to understand what that reason is, I do believe the opposite of that is probably your purpose. So if the environment bothers you, the fact that we're destroying the earth, it's supposed to bother you because we're supposed to do something about it. If animal abuse bothers you, it's supposed to bother you because you're supposed to do something about it. If bullying bothers you, it's supposed to bother you because you're supposed to do something about it. If ignorance bothers you and incompetence and those things bother you, like me, if people wasting their potential bother you, it's supposed to bother you because it's part of your purpose. And if it didn't bother you, it wouldn't be your purpose. Yeah.
If it didn't move you, it wouldn't be your purpose. There has to be some emotional connection to it. All right, second question is a little less heavy. Alan and I were in Pittsburgh, and this was Saturday night. So we gave the speech on Friday. Saturday, I hung out at the Airbnb. Alan went to the lunch, and then he went to the gym, and I ordered pizza, and I was going to watch UFC. I said, look, it's been a hectic week. Travel, did a great speech, awesome. I'm going to watch UFC. So, Alan, I think you got home at 5. UFC started at 6. You did a working session, and then you came downstairs, and it got late very fast. So this was probably
it did.
Yeah. Time went by really fast. So UFC wrapped up. I finished my pizza. It was about 11 o'clock, and it was just a very long week. So when I get very tired, I start talking weird. I have a lot of weird thoughts. A lot of it doesn't make sense. I don't know where it comes from. But I asked Alan this question. I said, hey, man. And then I started just laughing hysterically. And he was like, hey, are you high? Are you like smoked something while I was gone? And I said, no, man, I'm just really tired. And you know how I get when I'm really tired. I said, if you've ever driven down the street, let's just say maybe New York, any city. We're in a city right now. We're in Pittsburgh. And you look, there's these buildings, and they're super heavy. And there's these cars on the road, and they're super heavy. And there's all this heavy stuff just on the land. If you didn't know any better, you might think that the world is moving because we put a lot of heavy stuff on it. And I said, you know the weird thing, Alan? All of the heavy stuff actually came from the earth. So it doesn't really matter. It kind of offsets. That is the type of conversation you would hear me having on a Friday night or a Saturday night. That's what I like, talking about weird stuff like that. I've told this story before, but years ago, I'm up in Maine or Vermont somewhere with a group of friends. We're smoking a joint outside, laying on the dock, looking up at the stars. And I said, imagine if gravity just took a day off. We just floated out into space. We all died. That'd be weird, right? Anybody ever thought of that? And silence, crickets. No, we've never thought of that. We're not thinking of that. Well, that's what I think of on Friday. And that's why the first podcast I started was called the Hyperconscious Podcast. That's where all this started. Hyperconscious. I want to think about all this stuff, not just surface level. I want to think about all this stuff. So the second question is, what would I find you talking about on a Friday night? What would I find you talking about on a Saturday night? What would I find you talking about maybe when you're reminiscing with the people that are closest to you? Or what would I find you talking about when you're in your element? Just going off, talking about what you love talking about.
Kev is always contemplating weird stuff.
Definitely.
And
I'm a huge fan.
This whole business was built on contemplation. We don't talk about it often, but that's what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Every listener is contemplating with us, contemplating their life, contemplating their values, contemplating what they contemplate. Contemplation is a word we don't talk about often, but that second question is about what you're talking about with other people is what you're thinking about. And what you're thinking about is dictating your life. I was on book club. Again, a lot of good stuff happens on book club. I had this moment. We're reading Limitless with Jim Quick, and he's talking about your brain and the way you think. And I said, most of us are not understanding how important it is to protect. He was talking about the 4 horsemen is what he calls it. And it's the 4 digital distractions. There's digital dysmorphia, dysthenia. I don't know the exact terms. I really don't. He calls it the 4 horsemen, and it's essentially the rings and the dings and the bings and all the notifications we all get from all our devices all the time being so hyper-connected. It messes with our brain. That's what he's talking about. And I said in book club, think about how often you're giving away your consciousness. You're giving away your thoughts. You're giving away your focus. You're giving away your attention. If you're paying attention to Kevin and I right now, we are quite frankly helping you manifest the life that you want.
Hey everybody, I'm Rebecca. I started off with the group coaching and it was fantastic. I was able to use the PPT to kind of track. Now back then I wasn't very consistent, and as of late I have been working with Alan individually, and he's gotten to know me more on a personal level, and so he knows when to be gentle with me and when to push me harder, and he has really helped me with the consistency in the tracker, and he's just great to work with and really cares not only about my business goals but my personal life as well. So it's been a blessing working with him, and I'm just very thankful to have him take me just to the next level in business and in life.
If all of a sudden I started talking about geese and how I golf on the weekend, I don't golf, but it becomes useless information very, very quickly. Now, useless is contextual, so maybe you do want to golf, or maybe you work on a golf course that has too many geese that poop. That's why I thought of golf and geese, because of that. But the point I'm making is that I think a lot of people talk about a lot of useless things. And of course I would think that because I tend to always want to talk about self-improvement, personal development. I've broken it down into these 3: personal development, professional development, and business development. But if it doesn't have to do with one of those 3 things, it's very hard for me to invest a ton of time into, other than a couple other things like movies, fitness. But again, those all kind of roll up to personal development, because the reason I love movies is storytelling, and the reason I love fitness is health. Here's my point. If you're out there and you start contemplating what you're talking about, start contemplating, is this really what I want to talk about? Or is this what my friends want to talk about. I had a friend growing up. His name was Ryan. And he's a director of feature films now. And that's always been his dream. All he ever talked about was movies. Making movies, movies he loved, watching movies. His whole world was movies. He's obviously going to be a better director than someone who's like, yeah, I kind of like film. What is that for you? I call it your ozone. What's your obsession zone? What are you obsessed with? There's a lot of clarity in there waiting for you.
Third question. Just came up with this one. I've never asked this one before, but I do think it's one of those ones that makes you think. And I don't always care about being inspirational or motivational. I want to create a new thought in your mind that maybe you've never thought of before, because that's where breakthroughs happen. I really believe that. Some of the most important breakthroughs I've ever had are questions that I never asked before. And I was willing to and confident enough to try to answer. So one of the things that we decided early at NLU, this was before we were even NLU, but we said we're never going to do sponsorships. We'll never do ads. We're going to do our own stuff. Nobody's going to say, hey, you can't talk about this. Hey, you have to promote this product. It's just not it. Eventually, it got to the point where when we started to feel that having certain guests on was not the best for the listener, for you, whether you're watching or listening, then we said, you know what? We're not going to have guests anymore. We're just going to do 7 episodes a week. It's going to be totally solo, aka Alan and I, and we're going to use stories from our coaching sessions and stories from the community and stories from our experiences and our lives, and we're going to tell what we believe to be the closest version of the truth. And we stopped having guests completely. So the third question is, what would you never trade any amount of money for? For me, it's the ability to do this in the way that we do it. You couldn't give me, I'm not interested in Spotify buying this podcast for $100 million. I'm just not interested. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but that's not why I started. I started so I could talk about the stuff that I want to and impact the listeners in the way that I felt was best, right? That's where this all came from. It can't be a person. It can't be something with a heartbeat, because yes, there's no amount of money you could give me to take my wife. There's no amount of money you could give me to take my cats, Alan's family. It's off the table. So it can't have a heartbeat. I think that's a really good way to look at it. But for you, it might be the first picture you ever painted, because to you, it's so important. It's so special. To you, it might be something that a late family member gave you, and that might have a lot of really deep meaning. It could be, I know I won't give yours, Alan, but what was yours?
For me, it was physical fitness. I had all these mentors that I'm very grateful for. Coaches, mentors, dozens. And some of them were very, 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 very wealthy. But at the time, I was really physically fit. And I still am in comparison. But I remember thinking to myself, I would never trade my physique for your money. Never. I would never trade my physical fitness for your money. One of my mentors, I joke, he came up to me in the gym. He said, you feel really good at the beach, and I feel really good at the bank. And we laughed and we joked, and I was helping him with fitness. He was helping me with business and finance. I would never switch. Now, that tells me something about myself. This is about clarity. If you're sitting there and going, I would switch in a heartbeat, you could take away my physique, my physical capabilities, my physical fitness, my health and wellness, and I would be okay with that for $1 billion. Then that means you do not value fitness the same amount that I do. And that's okay. I'm not making that wrong. I would say that that's probably not good. But at the end of the day, we don't all value everything equally. We don't associate meaning to the same things. Some things mean the world to people, and I can't even imagine it. And vice versa. If you've ever heard about, certain NFTs, it's called a non-fundable token, and it's digital drawings getting sold for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. For me, as someone who doesn't value that, I can't imagine. I would much rather open a school or invest that in our business or whatever. But again, for you, what's the thing that you would never trade for the world? And for me, it's my physical health and my physical fitness and my physical capabilities. And I get very, very, very inspired whenever I watch physically disabled people do amazing things. Because I see a lot of people that are physically able and physically capable, and they do very little with it. And for me, that sucks, because there's people who would do anything to be as physically capable as you. And I try really hard not to forget that.
How much would I have to pay you to never watch a movie again? Hypothetically. Is there a number? You don't care about money, so it's not apples to apples.
I care about what, and it's so interesting that you asked that, Kev. I appreciate it. I care about what money can do. So this is where my mind went. I would give up watching movies if you gave me $5 million, we'll say, and I could invest that in helping educate the world.
Billion or million?
Billion.
I'm going to say millions.
No. Hey, come on. Jurassic Park's coming out in theaters in 3D?
No, I don't follow movie news like you. Did you know UFC, their next card's in Boston, Massachusetts, not an hour from where I live? I did.
Of course I didn't. Emilia, I sent her a screenshot. I'm so excited. So it's going to be date night. Jurassic Park, the first one, in 3D.
Okay.
30th anniversary. That movie came out 30 years ago. It's wild.
That is wild.
But I do value what money can do, and I would sacrifice movies. I wouldn't sacrifice my physical health, though. That's the difference. For $5 billion, I would not sacrifice my physical health.
I don't know if I would not watch UFC again.
Yeah, it's tough.
Because there are certain things that I want to do forever.
Mm-hmm.
And the more quote-unquote holistically successful I become, the better the experience is.
Mm-hmm.
When I watch UFC after a long week now, it's the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best. And eventually I'll go. Maybe.
And that's clarity.
I don't ever.
That's what this whole thing is about.
I don't ever want to trade that in. I know weed is not the most healthy habit in the world. I don't want to give it up. I just don't. I mean, I'm not like I used to be. It's not like I'm smoking weed every day. But yeah, where if you said, I'll give you, I mean, you could give me like $5,000 and I'd never have a sip of alcohol again. All right. Yeah, whatever. Cool. No worries. I wouldn't even care about the money really, but
see the difference?
Yeah.
That's clarity.
It's
and
very,
hopefully our listeners are asking themselves that same question, because that's the truth. You're just getting to the truth. I obviously value movies more than you do.
Definitely.
You obviously value weed more than me.
Definitely.
That's okay. But we need to know that so that we don't keep living in this distorted reality. All of us are, remember when you and I did the episode about how I wanted to, we talked about, the cookies, brownies. Mm-hmm. We did an episode where Kevin had extra brownies and I ended up eating them even though I wanted to be in shape. And I said, you know what? I don't care. I'd rather eat the brownies. At the end of the day, we want to not eat the brownies more than we really do. There's always a delta, and I hope that the listeners know that I'm not trying to be unkind with this. There's always a delta between what you say you want and what you actually want. Always. It's just how big is the delta? I know some people who are very real with themselves. They're like, yeah, you know what? Kev, that's very real of you to say, I don't want to give up smoking weed.
It's true.
There you go. A lot of people aren't that honest with themselves. I don't know how to...
It's almost the opposite, where they say, well, it's not detrimental.
Right. That's more of a lie though, because it is detrimental.
Yeah.
What Kevin is doing is, I really want to make this point land. What Kevin is doing is saying it's not optimal, and I know it, and I still want to do it because it's worth it to me. See how many layers of truth versus someone who's like, oh yeah, no, weed isn't bad for you at all. It's not a big deal. It's not detrimental to my life whatsoever. See how one of them is all ego and all untrue?
Delusion.
It's delusion. Yeah, it's delusion, which I would argue ego is delusion.
Or just lack of awareness. Yeah. But again, I watched a video. There's this really, you'd love this channel on YouTube. It's the anatomy, I don't know. They literally have cadavers and they show you, these are the muscles of the quadricep. This is the heart. And this is how it actually works. And they do all these awesome episodes. What actually happens when you build muscle? And how does that actually work? Super cool. But one of the things was, all smoking is bad for you. All of it. Any smoking. Because it's badness going into your lungs. It doesn't matter whether it's... Now, are some of those worse for you? Yes. But are any of them good for you? No. That was pretty much the video in a nutshell. And
that's a very truthful statement. I live for truths like that.
Yes. It's hardcore. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
But I watched it. I just watched it for the perspective of, let me see. Let me learn. Is this going to affect my behavior? Will this shift my perspective? Let's see.
One last piece too, quickly. Kevin and I realize that we are into holistic self-improvement, health, wealth, life, and love. We also realize that pizza is not optimal.
Definitely.
We know that eating pizza and Domino's is not the best source of nutrients that we can get. We are consciously choosing pizza because we love it, not because it's the healthiest. I just don't want anyone... I think it's important to just live in the truth. I might be the world's biggest advocate for the truth. I don't want to delude myself. I'm not eating pizza because I think that's what's best for me.
Right. I saw you had it this weekend.
Did I? Oh, yeah.
Yep. So you had it this weekend.
We got some Domino's. We got some Doms. Yeah, it was delicious. It was delicious. That's why I'm eating it, because I want to eat it. But I'm not sitting here pretending that that's optimal for my health and fitness. I understand that. And then it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. If that's true and fitness is most important to you, how come pizza? See how it gets very nuanced?
It would be very challenging to do this episode early on, because I know under all of that is, well, if you really want to have the most impact possible, Alan, you wouldn't watch any movies. And that's a fact. I wouldn't watch UFC. I wouldn't do anything. This is all I would do. But that wouldn't be holistic success.
And I wouldn't be as fulfilled.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would be success without fulfillment.
Right. There's justifications for everything. So don't, and you'll very, very rarely hear me say this, don't overthink it. Because for everything you say, you can have a justification for why, well, no, that's not realistic or whatever it may be. So don't overthink it. Okay, 3 questions. The last one, let me just go through them, and then we got to get out of here. 3 questions. Number 1, what bothers you? What creates emotion? What pisses you off? What frustrates you? What makes you super sad? What wrecks your day? Question 1. Number 2, what would I find you talking about on a Friday night if you were just over the moon to talk about it? For me, it's weird stuff that most people don't think of. I don't know. It's strange, but I love it. 3rd thing, what would you never trade any amount of money for? Not a person, not a pet, not something with a heartbeat. So it's maybe an experience, something you do, a feeling you have, your body, right? So I said the freedom of doing what we want on this podcast, probably also UFC. Alan said physical body, and you'd have to give him $5 billion to stop watching movies. Next Level Nation. If you have not yet joined our private Facebook group, please do. I am saying it now. It's on the records, in the books, the best family ever of all time, where you can be yourself. You can be authentic. You can talk about vulnerabilities. You can talk about what's real. And at the end of the day, that is what we did in this episode. So if you want to do it at a further, deeper level, join our private Facebook group. Link is in the show notes.
Weird contemplative thought. Think about yourself at 7 years old. You weren't that aware. You didn't know yourself that well. You didn't really understand how the world works or why it works that way. You didn't have a ton of different skills yet. You were, unless you were a child prodigy, which is possible.
I was,
but at the, of course, you just didn't really know much. You didn't understand much. So like Kevin now at 34 years old, that's the first time I've said that since your birthday.
It's the first time you got it. First time you got it right. You've been saying it for years.
It's the first time it's been true. 34 years old. He's just much more aware, has much deeper understanding, much more capable. That is what group coaching is about. We created the very best 90-day program of a group of 10 people to help you understand yourself at the deepest level, understand how the world works at the deepest level, and understand how to achieve your goals and dreams. If we picture ourselves at 7, we didn't know who we were, we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't know any clarity, we didn't know the answer to the questions on this episode. What if you're now 34 or 37 or 42 or 47? And what if you still don't know yourself nearly as well as you could? That's what group coaching is. That's what we're going to help you with. It's going to be a way deeper dive than this podcast. If you love this podcast, you will love group coaching. It is less than $97 per month for the 3-month program. Group 12 starts on October 3rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The link to the website will be in the show notes, and reach out to Kevin and myself. We do have a promo code for you. You can email us, alan@nextleveluniverse.com, kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. Email us, say, I want into group 12. We'll send you the promo code, and it'll be less than $97 a month.
Tomorrow, for episode number 1431, one of the best gratitude perspective shifts. This is something Alan and I used to talk about a lot. We used to do an episode every year around Thanksgiving talking about gratitude and how to practice it in a more aligned manner. So we're going to do that for tomorrow's episode. But there is one question I absolutely love. Questions are everything. Hyper-conscious questions. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we don't have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Go get more clarity. Next Level Nation.